Australia has just finished its tour of the United Kingdom, and it has already moved on and is now in its tour of Zimbabwe. The tour of England involved 5 one-day internationals and 1 2020 game against England. There were also 2 county tour matches to begin the tour. Australia was able to win both of those tour matches against the county teams reasonably comfortably, but were defeated 5-0 in the one-day internationals and then lost in the 2020 game. So in the end, Australia had 8 tour games, 6 international games, 2 wins and 6 losses. So it was a largely unsuccessful and disappointing tour for the Australians. Of course, this all has to be put in the appropriate context. We have to remember just how many players of the Australian best 11 are missing from this current team. Let's just think about this for a moment. Steve Smith and David Warner, the 2 best batsmen for Australia, are both suspended and out of the game. The all-rounder, Mitch Marsh, is also out of the game, and their best fast bowlers, including Mitchell Starc, Pat Cummins, Josh Hazlewood, and Nathan Coulter-Nile, are all out injured. Apart from the batting of Aaron Finch and Travis Head, it pretty much is a new team playing for Australia than the one we saw in the 2017-18 summer. So this is a new look team full of very inexperienced players. We should also mention the decision to drop players like Adam Zampa and Cameron White from the team and replace them with other players. It has meant that Aaron Finch and Glenn Maxwell and Shaun Marsh have basically been the core set of players to have the experience to lead Australia forward. Tim Paine, unsurprisingly, has struggled desperately to just put up a competent performance in both his batting and his captaincy. Having been given the captaincy of the Australian one-day international team before he had actually put up the performances to justify his position as the wicketkeeper batsman in the first place, he has had it all against him. So over this tour, he has had to deal with trying to be a good captain, trying to be a good wicketkeeper, and try to be a good batsman. And he has done moderately acceptable in the captaincy department, very poorly in the batting, and rather good in the wicketkeeping. So it was a moderate improvement for Tim Paine on where he'd been, but certainly he has not done enough to justify his position in the team as a player, and probably he will maintain his position merely because he's the captain, although how long he gets to remain captain is in doubt. There are plenty of other players in the Australian team who could take on the captaincy instead. With Adam Zampa taken out of the team, it means that Australia still doesn't have a one-day international spinner. The 2 spinners who played in this tour were Ashton Agar and Nathan Lyon. Agar played the majority of the games and was very much overwhelmed by the situation, and England took advantage of him. He only took a very small number of wickets and conceded a great number of runs. Nathan Lyon only played the minority of games and didn't do particularly well either. In the end, the great hero was a player who probably wouldn't be expected to have played in this series, namely Shaun Marsh. He was the great hero. Travis Head did moderately okay, and so did Aaron Finch. As far as the bowlers were concerned, I'd have to say that Billy Stanlake definitely stood up. He was very good, he was very fast, he was very aggressive, he was the best bowler that Australia has by a long distance. But other than that, the Australian bowlers were torn to shreds. This was a very high-scoring, batting-friendly series, and the Australian fast bowlers were just not up for it, and they were torn to shreds. It creates such an obvious difference with the two teams. The fact that the English fast bowlers were able to find a way to keep down the scoring even moderately in terms of how many runs the Australians could score, and that made all the difference. It meant that England could basically score freely and continuously, and the Australians had to figure out how to keep up the scoring rate in order to match it, and too often the weakness of the Australian bowlers was what lost out, and despite the best efforts of many good Australian batsmen, they just weren't able to compete and match up. So in the end, we have gotten a good sense of where the Australian team are at right now. Namely, they are trying to desperately rebuild their team with 12 months to go before the World Cup in England. They are currently in 5th place in the world. England are number 1. England are hosting. England are favourites to win this World Cup, and Australia are desperately in search of just creating a competent looking side so that they can go into this World Cup and compete and actually provide some sort of genuine attempt at defending their title. So I would say that as far as what Australia can do, they have got so much work ahead of them, and yet they do not have that many one-day internationals. They have barely 6 or so one-day internationals at home, and then they only have the tour of Sri Lanka, and that's basically it. So they have so much work to do, so little time. The World Cup is only 12 months away, and they've got to figure out what they can do. And so Australia have got to figure out what is their plan for the future, how can they turn this around. In the end, the team that was superior won the day. England are the superior one-day international team. They deserve to win. They did win, and they get everything. Jason Roy, Alex Hales, and Johnny Bairstow are one incredible upper order, and it's no reason why England don't think that they have a really good chance of winning this World Cup. All they need now is Ben Stokes, Chris Wokes, and for Ian Morgan to fire up, and they will have an unstoppable 11. So Australia is currently in Zimbabwe playing a 2020 tri-series with Pakistan and Zimbabwe. So we'll just have to keep monitoring the situation to see what Australia can produce in the coming few months before they come back home for the 2018-19 summer, featuring one-day internationals versus South Africa, and then tests versus India and Sri Lanka, and also some one-day internationals against India, and some 2020s against India. So that's all up ahead. You'd have to say that Australia just has to find a way to get all their fast bowlers to be healthy, and then they should be able to create a competent lineup. Let's not forget that with Stark, Hazelwood and Cummins, Australia were able to dominate over England in the Ashes, and there's no reason why, if they get those 3 fast bowlers up and healthy and running, that they could actually really give this World Cup a real red hot go and try and win it, because with 3 very talented, very fast, very aggressive and very talented fast bowlers, there's no reason why Australia can't think they could actually win this World Cup. It's all about whether or not those 3 fast bowlers, and also Coulter Nile and James Pattinson to a lesser extent, are healthy. So those are the big questions. The batting is less of an issue because of the terrific work that Shaun Marsh was able to do, which means that by the time Steve Smith and David Warner have their suspensions ended, it should mean that they should be able to slot back in, and Australia should not be that worried about their batting. Their batting unit looks very comfortable and confident and very reasonable, and I don't think there's anything to worry about in that area. So that's my assessment of the Australian tour of the UK in the 2018 summer, playing 5 one-day internationals and 1 2020 against England.